we deny ourselves our full humanity, and we deny ourselves our full capacity to show up as authentic, whole human beings. And intimacy, true high quality compatibility in relationship comes from connecting, from intimacy, from recognizing the sameness within each other.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Katarina Polonska, specializing in helping execs and entrepreneurs be as successful in their relationships as they are in their careers. Katerina is an ICF accredited high-performance relationship coach, gender dynamics social scientist, and founder of Successfully in Love Method. Her work focuses on the behavioral science of attraction and helping accomplished professionals find healthy, secure, meaningful love fast. As an ambitious woman with a master's degree from the University of Oxford and a background in behavioral science, she's had a lot of experience in the world of dating and relationships, from living and working in 6 different countries, helping her parents navigate a painful divorce, battling anorexia, to calling off an unhealthy engagement. She understands how hard it is when we don't want to settle in life, but do want to meet our match and settle down. Using her proven 3-phase process based on behavioral science of attraction, Katerina helps disheartened executives create their ultimate relationship fast and become successfully in love. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Katerina. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I look forward to our conversation. When I was going through your website and doing some research on you last night, I was like, wow, this is going to be an awesome conversation. I'm sure my listeners or viewers on YouTube will enjoy the knowledge that you're going to share with us and the stories. So, Katerina, please tell me your origin story, the key things from your earliest childhood recollections to where you are today in your life.
Oh, that's a lot of years to get through.
That's okay.
Oh, where to start? Where to start? So, born in Slovakia, half Slovakian, half Russian, but moved to England when I was 4 years old. And I think earliest kind of childhood dynamics there really came from being part of a high achieving family. I think any immigrant listening to this podcast will understand what I mean by that. You know, when your parents have relocated in pursuit of a better life, there's this kind of pressure that, you know, we've done this big move. Now it's your turn to reap the dividends of being in this new place. And so very high achieving parents, both PhDs. I think one of my parents has got 2 PhDs, both very, very, very academic. And then being in the UK, it was all about, you know, how successful can we make our life here? Obviously, communism had collapsed in Eastern Europe. And so I do vividly remember kind of England being this like glittering country, you know, with opportunities and all of this potential. We did find it difficult at the beginning when we first moved. There was like bizarre kind of, I don't say racism, but I guess xenophobia against immigrants. So that wasn't fun. I remember that quite vividly. But we eventually moved down south to London, which was a much more welcoming place for us at the time. And and settled down. And so my 20s, my teens and my childhood is really spent being in that kind of high achieving mentality. So I went to a really good girls' school. My parents like moved houses to make sure I was in the catchment area for this really good girls' school. Went to a really good girls' school, and it was the same school that Amal Clooney went to, which is so bizarre, but it's kind of a cool thing to say. And you know, we were all high powered and everyone was going to become like a lawyer or, you know, a big scientist or whatever. And I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew was that I was really interested in the concept of love. Like, you know, now I know there's probably a ton of childhood core wounds that were fueling that interest, and we can unpack that. But at the time, I was like, I'm just really interested in like love. I'm interested in like the dynamics between people, and like, where does love even come from, and how do relationships play out? And so I spent so much of my teens literally like studying literature on love, studying like the social science of love. My father, who's now a coach as well, he was always into personal development, and he was filling the house with all these books. Like, you know, I grew up on Tony Robbins and Susan Jeffers and Feel the Fear, Everlasting Guide to Love, and all these books on personal growth and relationships. So that was like very much what I was involved in. And then specifically within that, I was interested in looking at the gender dynamics. So looking at, how do men and women communicate differently with each other? How does sex play into it all? How does gender play into it all? I think part of that was fueled by the fact that I was kind of from Eastern Europe, and I would go back to Eastern Europe quite a lot. And Eastern Europe, and as well being in a girls' school, I say two very kind of gendered worlds that I was in, right? Where it was like very clear distinctions of like, this is how you are, this is how you should be, this is how, you know, your life's going to look like, and the kind of dynamics that you're into. And so I was like studying communication, and I'm actually interviewing John Gray, the writer of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, like next week, because I was reading him back then and kind of getting my head into all of this stuff, even though I disagree with a lot of it. And then in my 20s, well, actually I should backtrack. So two things happened in my teens as well. One, I had anorexia. A lot of women had that in my girls' school. Horrible, 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 awful disease. And, you know, I don't wish it upon anyone. The one thing that it did give me, though, is it pushed me into the world of personal growth in a much more hands-on way than I was in before. Like before, it was all theoretical. But when I had the anorexia and I realized I had anorexia, I wanted to help myself. I didn't want to be anorexic. I didn't really understand it. Coming from that kind of Eastern European background, it wasn't really a thing for my parents to, you know, send me to a therapist. I didn't understand what was going on for me. And so I remember seeing the school counselor and being like, this is okay. It's not that helpful. And so then going to my father and being like, I think I need help. And my father's solution to it all was, well, go train to be a coach in NLP and learn hypnotherapy, and I'll pay for your training and you can get these certifications. At least then you have something on your CV, and that should help you. Which in retrospect is a pretty bizarre way of looking at, you know, your daughter asking you for help. But I get his thinking. I think his thinking was, you know, she can, you know, teach a man to fish and all of that stuff. So I did my NLP and hypnotherapy qualification. Again, I was like 17 at the time. And so I took time off school and went to this retreat and did all my deep studying. And it didn't cure me of the anorexia, but it did set me down this path where I finally understood, you know, the unconscious mind, limiting beliefs, how my thought patterns were actually creating my reality. And it gave me this sense of control and understanding about the inner kind of landscape that we live and how it impacts our outer landscape. So then when I went to university, so I didn't actually plan to go to university, I was like, I want to be a coach now. I want to like build this business. But I was 17, like, you know, what exactly was I going to be coaching on? I don't actually know. But I did build a little business at uni on teaching students how to get like a first class degree. In the UK, we call it a first class degree. It's, you know, a high degree, because I was always like very academic. So that was my first little business. And at university, I specialized in looking at gender dynamics. So again, looking at kind of masculinity, specifically American masculinity was my main focus. And then graduated, recession everywhere. It was like 2008 recession. It was awful, no job prospects. And so I went on a bit of a detour in my career and started working in the wine industry. Not planned, not part of my kind of goals, but it was just, I remember thinking like, what can I do that will essentially give me another skill that I'm going to enjoy, that will help me ride out this recession? Because I had no idea how long a recession would last. In my little 21-year-old brain, I thought recession would be like a few months. Not the case. So I trained in the wine industry, got a job as an intern. They paid my wine exam, my WSETs, and started working for a wine startup. And that was my kind of first experience of working with executives hands-on, because I worked for a tiny little startup and there were two very ballsy, ambitious founders at the helm. We were like 7 people and I was reporting directly to them. And it was like the most entrepreneurial environment I could ever be in. It was so much fun and yet so much work and pretty high stress, but also like high fun, and had an amazing, amazing time. And that then inspired me to actually leave and create my own business, my own wine business. And so I found a co-founder. We ended up leaving the UK and creating a wine business here in Spain. And so I did that for a couple of years, loved it, learned so much about building a business. Because it was a wholesaler business. It had like, I had like trucks and like pallets of stuff and like no nails, because I was carrying crates of wine everywhere. Loved it. But after a while, I was like, I think I need to get, a real job. I think I need to actually go into more corporate space and actually learn, because I'm teaching myself at this point, and how much do I actually know? And also at this point, my dad left my mum. That was kind of like the personal thing that happened, where my dad left my mum completely out of the blue, completely unexpected. No one could see it coming. And that completely kind of collapsed the family dynamic. My mom didn't see it coming. My brother didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming. When my father called me to tell me that he was leaving my mother, I thought he was telling me that the cat had died. Truly, like I was expecting to tell me that the cat had passed away, and I was ready to cry, but I wasn't expecting to say that he was leaving my mother. And I'll never forget, in the kind of months after that, my brother collapsed, my mother collapsed. My father had left the country. He was like living with his new partner, because he had a new partner, and they had a kid and everything. And so much kind of pressure of that divorce fell onto my shoulders, of like, well, what do we do? What do we do financially? What does my mom do? And I remember I was like in Spain building this business, trying to kind of create my own revenue streams, figuring out this divorce whilst everyone's collapsing all around me. And I remember thinking, like, I need to have my own collapse. I'm tired and I'm holding this all in, but there's no space for me to have this collapse. And I'm just going to keep going, keep going, keep going. And inevitably I got to a burnout where it just kind of hit me. I remember one of my friends was saying that she couldn't help me at the time. And I just felt so alone and so afraid. And that was kind of a very, very low point in my life. At that point, I remember reaching out to my father again and saying, like, I need help. I need some help. Like, no offense, but you kind of did this to the family. Like, can you help us here? And so my dad set me up with a call with a lady called Marcy Shimoff. She's the author of Happy for No Reason. Because my dad works with a lot of these kind of big figures. And I remember jumping on a call with Marcy. She's like the specialist in happiness. And she like listened to my story and she was like, yeah, I can't help you. Like, you're too far gone for me to help you. But you know what will help you? She said, do this thing called the Hoffman process. The Hoffman process is a residential retreat. It's all about you kind of untangling your parental wounding, like the kind of the damage that your parents did, basically, and unpacking all the core wounds and working with all of that so that you can come to a place of healing and liberation. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't have the money for this retreat. It's in America, how am I going to get there? I run a business here. But I got a scholarship to go because they were incredibly generous. And I went pretty soon after I had that call. And I will say, my hairs are on end talking about it. Like, my life transformed at that retreat. It was such a powerful retreat. And it really helped me kind of detach from my parents in the most loving way, right? Where I was kind of like, yes, I'm their child, but ultimately their problems and their stuff and their divorce is not my problem. It's not my stuff. So that was very liberating. And after that, I ended up actually getting this clarity that I didn't want to run my business anymore. I didn't want to be, I wanted to go back into a more corporate environment. I wanted a bit more stability. And so I remember I was looking around for a corporate job and I found one in Dubai. Don't ask why I went to Dubai, but I moved to Dubai. This was definitely one of my kind of more questionable decisions, but at the time I was like, I just sold my company, where am I going to go now? I did not make that much money, to be clear, by the way, but I was like, where am I going to go now? And so I moved to Dubai to help build another startup with this corporate founder, and it was fun. It was not what I expected. And after about a year in Dubai, I remember thinking, like, okay, this sabbatical wine industry thing has to end. Like, this is going on for too long. I need to go into something a bit more meaningful with my life. also in Dubai, looking at the gender dynamics, my goodness, there was so much material to look at there, like so much. It's such a loaded society, especially kind of for me as an Eastern European woman, like looking at it from there, and I was single out there. So, it was like a really anthropological experiment living out there. And I decided that I was going to quit the wine industry and go into something more meaningful, something ideally that would allow me to give back and allow me to kind of study gender dynamics more fully, look at behavioral science. And that's when I made my kind of grand plan to shift careers and go back to university and do a master's degree. And so started applying in secret, like writing my little applications. And I ended up getting into Oxford, which I didn't think I would. I didn't tell anyone I'd applied. It was like my little secret that I'd applied. I didn't honestly think I would get in, but I got in and managed to leave Dubai after a bit of difficulty with my employer, managed to leave Dubai in the end. And I went to Oxford and did my master's there. And that was one of the best things I've ever done. Hands down, one of the best things I've ever done. For two reasons. One, it was an opportunity to really unpack, again, I'm going to keep saying the gender dynamics, but really unpack like my own societal conditioning and understand where have my own problems, like the anorexia, which also came back when I was in Dubai, because I wasn't happy in Dubai. I did not like living out there. I liked it for the first year, but after a while I was like, there's only so much drinking and partying I can do. Like my life is a little bit vacuous here. And the anorexia came back. And my flatmate's anorexia came back at the time. She was like 13 years older than me, but she was spiraled. And so when I was at Oxford, I was really untangling, like, how is it that a woman who is, a sovereign free being in her late 20s can develop anorexia? Like, where does that come from? This is definitely some kind of societal stuff. So I was looking at that. I was also looking at masculinity again in more depth. And I was just really understanding communication, conditioning, traumas, wounding. Where is it that our gender dynamics, at least in an Anglo-American sense, hold us back and limit us from our full humanity? So super interesting. And then after that, briefly worked in the nonprofit sector, working with founders, so kind of back in that executive space. And I moved to Canada to actually build an impact investment vehicle with a couple of other high-profile founders in the refugee space. Bit of a side thing, but so building that impact investment vehicle was super interesting. And then I moved into behavioral science full-time as a kind of career, and worked for a really big global behavioral science consultancy, went on to become a vice president there, and really was consulting companies on their people, right? On their people strategy. How do they actually make people happier? How do they make people work better together, create better relationships, and so on and so forth. Loved that. Over time, realized that I didn't love the group work because I wasn't sure how effective it was. And that's what got me curious back on the coaching train, because I realized that you need one-on-one personalized work. And that led me to then working for a big coaching company, the biggest coaching company in the world, and then getting my own coaching qualifications, going into executive coaching. Parallel to all of that, kind of the final thing I'll say with this very long story is as I got to my late 20s, I'd been out there dating in Dubai and dating in Oxford and kind of living my life and blah, blah, blah. But I got to this point where I was like, yeah, it's about time that I meet someone. It's about time that I settle down, right? Like, I've got enough money now to put a deposit down on a property. I had moved to Vancouver in Canada. I was like, it's a lovely, slower paced city. It's very different to London. And I just was like, it's time for my white picket fence. It's time for it's time to settle down and have that lovely life. Biological clock as well. I don't want to be, too old and geriatric mother. And so I remember going on Bumble and the dating apps and like scrolling through, and I'd been dating around, but I was very keen that I was like, I'm ready to meet someone. And I hear this all the time from my clients, right? They get to this point, they're like, yeah, I'm ready. And I did meet someone and we had a really lovely relationship. It was all picture perfect. We looked the part, we had a great lifestyle together. He moved in, we had a lovely home, we had lovely holidays, like everything was really lovely. And yet throughout it all, even after we'd got engaged and this big wedding was planned and the dress was bought and guests are invited, I had this kind of nagging anxiety that something was a little bit off and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I remember I was like seeing a therapist. I've been doing therapy for like 15 years at this point. I was journaling, I was meditating because I'm a mindfulness teacher, so I was meditating a lot. And I was really a mindfulness teacher. I became a mindfulness teacher more recently, but I was meditating and really trying to understand like what's going on for me. And the mistake that I made And the mistake that I see with 9 out of 10 clients that I work with is that I kept diminishing my own anxiety and my own fear out of this rhetoric of anxiety is bad, fear is bad. I need to just get rid of it because there's no place for fear and anxiety. I need to kind of be strong. I need to power through. And this is probably just my fear of commitment, or this is probably just me self-sabotaging, or this is probably just something I'm doing. And actually just, I just squashed it down, get rid of it. I don't like it. I don't like it. And I kept not liking it and pushing it away and pushing it away for years. And in the end, that kind of nagging voice got so strong that I started to have panic attacks in that relationship after we were engaged. And everything on the surface looked fine. It was ostensibly a really lovely relationship. There were obviously problems, and every relationship has problems. But there was this like nagging thing. And it was only when I started seeing my own relationship coach back then, who was so much exponentially better than my therapist, because she kind of said something to me that really landed and haunted me. And she said two things, actually. One, she said to me, you need to get very, very good at learning to discern whether your anxiety and your fear and how you're feeling is a response to what's happening in the present moment in real time, or is it a response to a past memory? Is it coming from the past, or is it coming from the present? Because that's going to help you discern, are you actually self-sabotaging here and it's a projection, or is it actually your gut instinct flaring, telling you that this is actually not the right fit? And that was so profound to me, because I remember thinking, like, I actually don't know. So I don't know if this is from the past and this is from the present. And that's when I started doing the deep inner work around that. And then the second thing that she said was, after working together for a while, she got very clear on who I am, my values, what I need. And she just kind of said, like, is it fair to say that in the next 10 years, and she kind of mapped out my life over the next 10 years and how it would look like. And she painted this picture, and she was like, is it fair to say that that's pretty incongruent with who you are and what you need to be happy long term? And that's when I really got that I was actually fundamentally incompatible to this person. And so I ended up calling off that engagement. And after I called that engagement off, which was awfully traumatizing, that was by far the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Not because, we were married or anything, like we were engaged, yes, but for someone who was a high achiever, who was, little Miss Picture Perfect and always, trying to strive and do good and perform and get the promotion and have the nice property and blah, blah, blah. For me to, in my 30s, at prime baby making age, to just be like, I'm walking away from this, even though it's not actually fully broken, but I'm choosing to walk away. It felt like my life had imploded from within. It really did. It was such a difficult decision to make. And it was so terrifying to me. My whole life just seemed dark. And then, throw into that, there was like problems happening back home. And it was all just like a very chaotic time. So all of that to be said, after I left that engagement, I decided to take my love life, my relationships, much more seriously, because I was like, I lost a lot of money in that engagement, just walking away from everything. I lost a lot of time, right? Fundamentally, like biological clock had not wasted, but I spent a lot of time with him. And I was like, here I was thinking, I'm someone who has done therapy for 15 years. I work in behavioral science. I've been to retreats. I meditate. This should be easy for me, right? Like, how did I get relationship so wrong? And that's when I realized there's a difference between doing relational work and looking at myself in relation to my relationships and how I relate romantically, and doing just personal development, which is me, meditating in a room and being fine. They're two very different things. And so I spent a year, 11 months, digging really deep into that, unpacking everything that I had done wrong, and really looking at myself in relation to my relationships, and kind of embodying everything that I already had studied in theory, but really practicing it and applying everything that I already knew and going deeper. I then met my husband 11 months after I called off that first engagement. So very, very quickly, I met my husband from doing all of that work. And then at that point, I decided to quit my corporate, go full-time as an executive coach, build my executive coaching practice, And as I started coaching executives, I realized that so many other executives had a similar story to mine, but they were still in that relationship, or they had just recently walked away from that relationship and were feeling really lost. And so that's when I was like, okay, there is a real problem here with talented, high achieving people just being stuck in miserable relationships and second guessing themselves and doubting themselves and distracting themselves through working, going to the gym, drinking, socializing, whatever it might be, going on holidays. But their relationship is pretty crap. And it's not at all what they deserve. And why is that? And so that's why I began to specialize in this niche and kind of pull together everything that I knew from the gender dynamics space, from the behavioral science work, from all of my training, from my own personal experience. And then I trained as well, final thing I'll say, as an integrated attachment theory practitioner, because for me, the attachment theory work that I did on diving into my core wounds and clearing those out at the root level was probably the biggest game changer in helping me transform myself from being, feeling really disheartened and full of self-doubt and anxiety to being happy, healthy, secure, and happily, in love with my husband and living here in Ibiza. That was a very long intro.
That was awesome. No, don't apologize. You're great. You're great at sharing, a good storyteller. A lot of people aren't able to be, have a great flow from their youth to where they are currently. I wrote down lots of notes. You went through
Amazing.
so much stuff. It was, I don't even know where to specifically pick any of it. Just the fact that you're tenacious would be a good summary for me. A lot of people don't realize or don't want to admit that tenacity is a superpower. So you can be at the lowest part of your life and having trials and tribulations, but to be able to, even if it takes a little bit of time, but to be tenacious enough, to be aware enough, to reflect on your life and be willing to step out on your comfort zone is amazing in itself. And most high achievers that I've dealt with in my own career as a serial entrepreneur, dealing with them on even my podcast interviews I've had, it always is the same theme. People don't let themselves, when they fall and get a boo-boo on their knee, they stand up, put the Band-Aid on, and they move forward and try to correct so that injury or trauma doesn't happen again. Living in Canada, I love Canada. Obviously, I'm from Canada. Vancouver's a beautiful place. Very congested though. Very congested. But I think, yeah, it's
interesting.
And when you get a chance, Google real estate prices in the world. Vancouver's in the top 5.
I owned my condo in Vancouver. Trust me. There's a reason I'm able to live in Ibiza. It's because after selling in Vancouver, I was like, I can afford anything anywhere now.
People have,
well,
Vancouver's, well, again, it depends how much you've been across Canada. Vancouver's very congested. To me, it's because most of British Columbia, where Vancouver is, for those listeners, because I have listeners from 44 different countries. So it's on the west coast of Canada for those that are listening. It's right on the coast. It's beautiful. But the rest of the province is trees and mountains, majority of it, right? So everything's congested. That's what I mean. Like if you move to where I live, which is Alberta, which is right beside British Columbia, our capital, like where I live in the capital, is 1.5 million people. So it's less people, but we have, like, I can get across my city in 35 minutes. There's park systems everywhere. I go to Vancouver. I love it there because I have listeners from there. I have lots of friends. I have family that live in BC. I feel like that's why I mean by congested. I feel like when I've been to London, I was in London last year at this time. Actually, this week I was there a year ago. You're right though. London's a lot more fast paced. So I don't disagree with that comment. Yes,
way more congested.
But when little old Canadian going to London, it was just, to me, it was just like, wow, this is amazing. That was my first time there. So, but yeah, you've gone through so many different things. Like getting engaged and then reaching out to somebody that's not necessarily a therapist, but somebody that's a relationship coach. And the reason I bring that up is those listening or watching on YouTube, you don't always get the right answers you want from a so-called professional. And I'm not here to knock down the professionals. I know many people, including myself, that have been professionals. Sometimes the best advice I get are people that have gone through the school of hard knocks, went out and learned about what is their trials and tribulations, how do they correct it. Maybe they go get certifications like you, and they are sometimes the best. People like yourself are sometimes the best life coaches, right? The best internal person to look at who I am and say, well, you know what, I can relate to that. And again, I'm not against people that are book taught that are therapists, but a lot of what they're teaching, they have an experience. So I find in certain aspects of life, it's better to go to people such as yourself
Yeah.
that aren't a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And the reason I
Right.
want the listeners to understand that is there's such the societal norms of, if you have issues, go talk to a professional psychiatrist or psychologist, doesn't necessarily give you what you need. Sometimes you need to
Right.
search out people like yourself.
I agree with you on that. And that's not to poo-poo therapy or, working with psychologists. It has its merits. I did 15 years of therapy and I still sometimes do it because it's brilliant for awareness raising.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Right? Going to a neutral therapist who hasn't been in your position and they can just ask you the questions to help drive awareness and kind of increase your capacity for understanding your situation and the stories of your situation. Fantastic. And when it comes to
Agreed.
actually solving the problem and building the capabilities, the muscle of, well, okay, now that I know this, how do I get rid of what's holding me back in a practical, efficient way that actually understands my busy schedule? That was the thing for me in therapy. I was like, I work 12 hours a day. Like, I'm really busy. I need efficient tools and techniques I can apply to change my brain, to reprogram my unconscious patterns that are holding me back, not just talking for an hour, right? Or doing very laborious and kind of CBT, which in my opinion, no offense, but like a lot of CBT doesn't work because you're using your conscious mind to override the unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind is like 95 to 97% of your brain. So do the math, it doesn't really work. So with therapy, it's like when it comes to actually making progress and taking action, it can be very limited. Not all of it. You do get some miracle worker therapists out there, but generally speaking, with all the 30 therapists or whatever that I've seen, it was actually when I started delving into working with a good relationship, not any kind of relationship coach, right? There's a lot of bad relationship coaches out there too, but working with someone who could actually help me kind of build more action. And then specifically the biggest game changer with me was working with a relationship coach who was able to help me learn to master my unconscious mind, because it's in the unconscious mind where all of the problems and solutions are really. And that's exactly what I've gone on to train in, because it's like, I'm a sucker for qualifications. Like, I just love the stuff. It's like in a nerd, but it's the most powerful work, right? 3 to 6 months and you can utterly transform your life. You don't need to do 15 years of therapy.
Which is what people really in society are looking for. They're looking to
Right.
collapse time frames. They're not looking to have that person sit down and say to them, oh, this could be 3, 6, 9 months, a few years. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how long it's going to take for us to unpack your trauma or what you're
Right.
going through.
Exactly.
And a lot of it has to do, again, like you said, it's a discovery thing. They want you to become aware. But again, now at the end of the day, they're not putting together a roadmap for this is where you need to,
Yeah.
what you need to do, what you need to go through. And this isn't just in regards to relationships. So this process you're talking about is also in regards to even my industry, dealing with people in a lifestyle and financial coaching practice for 21 years. I'm dealing with people and I can relate to them. I can talk to them about,
Yeah.
I can share stories with them about, because I've gone through a lot of what they're experiencing. The difference
Yeah.
between me and them is the journey. Just like you've
Yeah.
got,
Yeah.
you're at this part of the journey, they're here. They haven't hit where you
Right.
are, but along
Right.
that giant gap, your experience, your knowledge and power of not
Yeah.
learning and wanting to grow and develop and become a better human being is now going to help them. And it's the same
Yeah.
as me. And so many people don't realize that you don't need somebody that's always analytical and just matter of factly, this is what we do. We put you at start A you're going to get to D, and we're going to follow this process, this
Yeah.
process, this process. Sometimes too structured in my experience, education on anything is just, it's not good. You need to have somebody
Yeah.
that's going to listen to you,
Yeah.
relate to their own experiences, and then go to the next block and to go to the
Right.
next, where you need
Right.
to go in the path.
And also to add to that, like relate to the experiences of other clients,
Oh,
right?
I do all the time.
Right.
All the
Something I get
time.
asked a lot is like, why do you only work with executives and entrepreneurs? And I mean, that is a loose term, right? Like I've worked with Hollywood film directors, philanthropists, and like, high-end chefs. The executive to me is anyone who's in a high-level job. But it's like I work with them because I'm always following data. I'm following patterns. I don't see personally the value, or not the value, but I think it'd be incredibly inefficient for me to try to become a specialist in everything, right? Because not only have I not lived every experience out there, but like I only know my experience. I only know a high achieving lifestyle. I only know kind of, and again, most high achievers, to be clear, don't think they're high achievers. This is the thing. Most high achievers are very, very doubtful. They think they can do a lot more. They can work a lot harder, but they're not quite there. They're not good enough. They haven't achieved what they want to achieve. They're not the finished product enough, blah, blah, blah. They're working with this kind of person who's like ambitious, who wants more from their life. Not only can I understand that, but when I pull together clients like that and I see the patterns and I see the data consistently, I get better at finding solutions and ideating hacks to get them from point A to point B, right? Which to me makes way more sense than trying to help everyone everywhere, because I'm not going to be that efficient at it.
A lot of people, though, I find in my, being in business for over 30 years, they want to have it all. So they want to service it
Right.
all. And sometimes you
Mhm.
have to niche down. You have to
Yeah.
even, have specifics. In my industry, some people will focus on it all and they're
Yeah.
master of nothing. And really, so that what they do accomplish a lot, but none of it's focused or really is specific to the person they're
Yeah.
dealing with or the company they're
Exactly.
dealing with. And it's okay. And okay is
Yeah.
not good enough, right? Everybody
Yeah.
thinks it is, but if you do that and you try your hardest, that'll be okay. No, it's not okay. I don't agree with okay. I agree with
Yeah.
the fact that you need to put in all the efforts you can to get to the
Yeah.
end result of what you're looking for,
Yeah.
and do that in a specific way, in a niche. You don't need to
Yeah.
look at it's just like people with personal development. They're all over the
Yeah.
place. I have conversations all the time on calls with people and tell them, oh, okay, what are you trying to achieve? Okay,
Mhm.
why are you reading this? Why are you listening to,
Mhm.
or why are you going to this conference? You should be doing this and that. Try to give them focus to niche into what they're
Yeah.
trying to affect in their lives. And again,
Yeah.
like you were saying, people are all over the place. That's just not the way to be. You need to be more
No,
specific.
100%. 100%.
So, Katerina, you teach how one must understand gender dynamics and why it will tip the scale in one's favor to start and eventually have a healthy relationship. Could you please explain how understanding gender dynamics can give a person that deciding edge to that elusive healthy relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk about gender dynamics, I'm really talking about two things. One, I'm talking about the gender roles that we play in society that we've been conditioned into, right? And how they kind of shape our personality, how they shape our expectations of each other, how they shape how we communicate, how they shape the things we like, how they shape kind of how we show up with each other. And then I'm also talking about the more kind of modern day, I guess, terms, which is kind of looking at masculinity and femininity from an energy perspective, looking at polarity, looking at these kind of more esoteric principles. So there's kind of two things here. And unfortunately, the English language doesn't have a more sophisticated language. Like we just have the word gender for it. So it is what it is. Or rather masculinity, femininity. Pet peeve, but it is what it is. So when I think about the gender roles, specifically there, everyone's going to have different expectations, right? And that to me is something that's been ridiculously clear, having lived in 6 different countries and showing up with my own expectations from Eastern Europe about how, a quote unquote woman should be in relationship and how quote unquote a man should be in relationship. Talking about heterosexual relationships here. It's very specific. And I would run into so many kind of cultural differences, across the borders, and so many kind of moments of disconnect between what is it that I'm expecting and that I'm looking for, without really questioning it, without really interrogating, is this actually what I need? Is this actually what I want? It's going to make me happy, but just kind of assuming this is how it is, right? And it was really through a process of unpacking it over time and recognizing that the gender roles that we play are context specific. They're not inherently who we are. There's going to be some biological drive there, of course there is, but the specifics around, the kind of very tangible things like who pays the bill, in many cultures that's going to be the man, in other cultures it's going to be like, the woman, because feminism, in other countries like we should split the bill. Like everyone's got some different interpretation around this. And so even just getting really curious and clear around what are my expectations, what are my shoulds, what kind of worldview do I hold around my role based on my gender and the other person's role based on their gender, and what kind of things will I need to be clear about when I get into that dynamic to ensure that we're on the same page and to ensure that we're compatible, right? Because there can be a lot of things that are very ingrained that actually aren't that malleable and that you are going to, knock heads against. So that's kind of on the very practical, tangible side. And then on the more esoteric side, on the more energy side, when we think about masculinity and femininity, which is really trendy in the coaching space right now, you go on Instagram and everyone's like masculinity, femininity, like all they talk about. But a lot of that is problematic in my view, because what that kind of language of, men need to be more masculine and women need to be more feminine does is it takes a series of qualities that we define in this, poor English language, which is ill-equipped for this kind of discussion. These qualities as masculine qualities like strong, assertive, whatever they might be, like steadfast, conscious, stoic, blah, blah, blah. And feminine qualities of soft, emotional, chaotic, more fluid, all of these kind of feminine qualities, which really in other languages could be, yin and yang, two just different principles. They're not actually rooted in gender. But when we talk about it from a polarity principle perspective, and we simplify it, which is what most of pop culture is doing, and we say that men need to be more masculine and women need to be more feminine, we're basically cutting off half of ourselves. Because what we do know on a more biological scientific level is that human beings are a mix of every type of quality. Doesn't mean that from a sex perspective we're all hybrids. No, it just means that from a personality perspective, from a energy perspective, we're all integrated beings. I'm just as assertive as I am soft. I am just as stoic as I am emotional, because I'm a fully fledged human being. Now, I might choose to lean into more certain qualities more than others because they might feel better for me, because I might be conditioned into doing them, but I shouldn't be denied them. And so this is all kind of a long-winded way of saying that when we don't have a full understanding of these things and we try to operate in certain ways, which I see a lot of in things like, pickup artists and like dating coaches and, sexuality stuff, and you've got to be this, you want to attract this, and you have to dress like this. Like when we go down these kind of very two-dimensional rabbit holes, we deny ourselves our full humanity and we deny ourselves our full capacity to show up as authentic, whole human beings. And intimacy, true high quality compatibility in relationship comes from connecting, from intimacy, from recognizing the sameness within each other, from recognizing our common humanity together. It's only when we recognize that we are actually the same can we have that full human connection, show up fully as ourselves and be honest and with who we are. And then on top of that, you can then start building into, the attraction and the sexuality stuff, the more kind of traditional polarity mode. But you need that. You need two people who feel solid, integrated, stable, independent, and fully fledged 100% human beings with a full 360 degrees of their personality and their range and their capacity to be everything, to feel seen and to feel heard as who they are, to actually be happy together. I got really woo there. Did any of that make sense?
Absolutely, it made sense.
Okay.
I wish all of society would get the fact that we don't need to be pigeonholed, right? We don't have to be in
much more articulately put. Yeah.
Right. This rabbit hole versus that rabbit hole. I know I look at it, I have 5 children. They're all adults now,
Yeah.
and four of them are girls. And I look at what my daughters have gone through, even my son, he goes through specific things of what his
Yeah.
role is in life. And like you said, being strong, being this, being that, a woman being soft and this. And we have a lot of discussions. I actually had a
Yeah.
massive discussion with one of my daughters. She lives in British Columbia.
Oh, nice.
We actually had we had a Zoom call, or pardon me, like a FaceTime call, and we discuss everything from feminism to, anything you could think of. And as a dad of multiple daughters, I'm out there telling people, you know what, quit telling women that they need to be this way. Oh, and
Right.
quit telling boys they need to be this way. Like the old
Yeah.
adage, little
Yeah.
boys don't like boys don't cry. Like, stop that. Girls need to be all blah blah blah. Need to do this, they need to act this way. We're a melting pot. Come on. Like, I like how
Yeah.
you said it. We're
Absolutely.
a combination of everything. Those watching on YouTube, I did that. Yes. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
just like Katerina said, we need to understand we are more than society labels us to be. And,
Yes.
quit letting people tell you what you shouldn't be. What do
Absolutely.
what does your core inner self tell you, your triggers when you
Yeah.
talk to yourself, right? Try talking to yourself in the mirror. I tell people that all the time. How do you feel? Is it
Yeah.
uncomfortable when you say to yourself, well, somebody said this about me? Now say that to yourself looking in the mirror. How does it make you feel? If you
Yeah.
felt icky after they said it to you or after you read it, maybe they didn't say it. Maybe you read it. Maybe it's a podcast. And as a side note, if things make you feel bad, don't do it. Right?
Right.
If
Right.
at all possible, stop reading that stuff, stop listening to that, quit watching that television show that makes you feel like you're part of the show. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be entertainment, it's not supposed to be life, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, I
Yeah. No,
digress. I
absolutely.
digress.
Absolutely.
So, there's so many different things I want to talk to you about yet. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to get into um, the fact of what are some of the most common myths and mindset challenges that cause people in general to
Mm.
self-sabotage or new or already in place relationships?
Yeah. Oh, that's, yeah, perfect question because I mean, I can talk for like hours about this.
Let's go.
So, our self-sabotage, I mean, first of all, I don't really believe in the term self-sabotage, even though I use it, because if we break it down in a kind of behavioral science perspective or neuroscience, whatever you want to call it, but our self-sabotage is just our unconscious mind trying to get our needs met, right? As we know, 95 to 97% of our behaviors are driven by our unconscious mind. And so the behaviors that you're doing, like let's say you try and give up sugar because you're like, sugar's bad and I'm overweight, I'm giving it up. So you throw out all the sugar in your house and you're like, I'm never eating sugar again. And you start on day one of diet. Day one's great. Day two is great. Day three, like, oh, I'm slipping a little bit. And day four, you wake up and there's like a bag of cookies in your bed and you're like, I don't know how they got there, right? The reason that is because on an unconscious level, your unconscious mind is still getting needs met through sugar. Now, you've not found out what those needs are, nor have you created another healthier strategy to get those same needs met. So your unconscious mind is going to work extremely hard to get those needs met, and it's going to revert back to the only strategy it knows, which is going to be eating cookies in your sleep, right? Because it's a maladaptive strategy, but it's trying to look after you. So in the same vein, if I'm someone who keeps getting into relationships with, let's say, I know, men who don't treat me well and they breadcrumb me, they come on really strong at the beginning and then they stop giving me so much attention. And then as I start to show them more interest, they start to kind of like giving less attention. And eventually they're like dropping little breadcrumbs of, a text here and like a date here, like these little bits. It's enough to keep me hooked, but it's not enough to make me kind of feel safe. And what's really going on there? What's going to be going on there is that there's self-sabotage. That self-sabotage is going to be staying in a relationship with someone who isn't actively choosing you. It's staying in a relationship where you are self-abandoning yourself, right? Because fundamentally, those breadcrumbs are not enough and you are worth a lot more. Now, the self-sabotage piece is that on an unconscious level, you have a need for love and connection, probably, or you have a need for, I don't know, whatever the need might be. Everyone's got different needs. But you haven't found a healthy strategy way of actually getting that need met. You only have the maladaptive strategies, which is going to look like tolerating bad behavior from this person because you haven't actually looked at this core wound. You haven't actually started to examine it, unpack it, and solve for it. And so you end up stuck in this unconscious cycle where you are perpetually tolerating not good enough behavior from someone else. There's also going to be a load of other stuff going on there, like a ton of core wounds, the wound of that maybe I'm not good enough. And so an unconscious need is going to be to prove that I'm not good enough. And so I'm going to prove that on an unconscious level by being around people who recreate the exact reality that says to me that I am not good enough, because it's an unconscious belief, and on an unconscious level, I need to prove that it's true, right? I've got to say a lot there. The point is that the self-sabotage stems from our childhood, and it stems from an innocent place. It's not something we do consciously. It's not something that we're doing maliciously or because, we're trying to wreck a relationship. It's because on a deep, fundamental core level, we aren't actually fully healed human beings. Not many of us are. Why? I mean, the human condition is pretty rough. If you think about the world that we're born into, the capitalist society that we're born into, the pressures of society, we don't have much community anymore. We don't really have our families around the same way we used to. We have a lot of competition out there to get even the very basic kind of survival these days. It's not, us growing up in a lovely communal village where we feel safe and we've got lots of land anymore. So inevitably we grow up into a bit of a tougher place. And our parents don't know how to raise us perfectly because they never learned how to raise us perfectly. And they've got their own stuff going on. So they're not fully present because, of course, how can they be? They're busy fending for themselves or busy working or whatever they're doing. And so this is all kind of a big cocktail of conditioning within the child that basically leads to micro traumas, or I call them core wounds. They're kind of the wounding that happens between the ages of 0 and 8 that communicates to the child on an internal unconscious level that there's something wrong with you. You're broken. You're not enough. You're bad. You're defected. You can't trust anyone. You're alone, whatever it might be. These kind of core wound patterns. And so these core wound patterns are going to have unconscious needs around them to prove that they're right and to also kind of comfort themselves. And they are what's going to be driving your behavior as you get out there into the world and start to date, start to get into relationships. You won't be aware of those 9 times out of 10 unless you've done this deep inner work. And you will find yourself having behaviors that ultimately sabotage the relationship. Like classic ones are fault finding in a partner. So actually, let me take a step back. The really big one is getting into a relationship with someone who's actually healthy and good for you and immediately being quite repulsed by them. I call it the ick, right? So you say you're with them for like a few dates or a month or so, and you start to get this ick feeling of like, actually, I'm not into them anymore. Maybe they're not attractive enough. Maybe they're not what I thought. Maybe their smile actually really irritates me. And you start to actually kind of push this person away because you lose attraction. Self-sabotage strategy number 1. Number 2 is getting into a relationship with someone and fault finding lots of problems with them, nitpicking, right? Kind of becoming very critical about them. They're never good enough. They're never perfect. That's also an unconscious wound flaring up there. Another self-sabotage strategy is going to be the fear of intimacy, the opposite of that one, right? Which is you get close to someone and you start to freak out and you start to kind of push them away. And you push them away unconsciously by working harder, going to the gym more, seeing your friends more, not sharing so much about yourself, hiding parts of yourself. Hiding parts of yourself can show up in different ways as well, right? Like role playing who you are, hiding under a banner of perfectionism, having a very manicured version of yourself. Like I can go on for days about the different types of self-sabotage that we do, but none of it is coming from a place of conscious, I'm here to wreck the relationship. It's all coming from the core wounded version of you that really needs examining and healing.
Yeah, unfortunately, in today's society, or even not even just today's society, so many people don't understand that learned behavior that we get from our parents. And as you mentioned, they aren't healed themselves. And it's a
Right.
generational thing. It goes from generation to generation. It's not even just how we look at relationships, it's how we look at nutrition, it's how we look at communication, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, 0 to 8 is such a powerful time in our lives. And our parents pick up stuff at work because they're hearing other people's challenges and issues because they have a work friend or they're around the water cooler. Then they bring that home. Maybe their job sucked that day and they bring it home and they think that they can leave work at work and home life's home life.
Yeah.
But then they have conversations with their significant other, or they could be a single parent frustrated. Kids pick up on that. Kids ask questions, get poo-pooed, go away. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. Then they feel inconsequential, or they see, I've seen this many times, a relationship break up and with their other parent, and then they get into a mixed relationship, right? They have kids, both of them, and all of a sudden there's that conflict, and they're learning all this stuff. They don't know how to cope with the anxiety their mom or their dad's feeling in this new relationship, or the fact that, like, my kids, because I went through a divorce, called themselves suitcase kids because they felt like they were living out of a suitcase all the time.
Yeah.
And all that just mixes it up into that emotional and our mental imagery of what life should be. And like you said, then all of a sudden your unconscious mind, which is controlling most of what we do, is constantly pick at
Yeah.
us. And even if we think we can beat it, right, for a short period of time, it can come back in,
Yeah.
tenfold. I like how you put all that stuff. It's unfortunate that so many of us don't understand, and we feel guilty about how we feel and how we react to things, when a lot of it is, again, that learned behavior. We think that everything we do is a mistake. We don't know how to pivot and take those words like mistake and say, that wasn't a mistake. This happened. This is the end result. I need to be self-aware and analyze this, maybe with a coach or with a psychologist or somebody, and tell myself this isn't a mistake. This is a life lesson. It's
Yes.
only a mistake if I continue to go on with
Yeah.
that process and I decide not to change. There's different things we can do or say to actually elevate our mindset and trigger ourselves. Like, I call it a negative. You can have a negative wall.
Yeah.
Negativity comes in. I
Yeah.
instantly analyze it. And now how am I going to deal with it? No,
Yes.
that's not a
Yeah.
mistake. That's a life lesson. Now, what am I going to
Yeah.
learn from it? And
Yeah.
who am I going to utilize, or what tools am I going to utilize to help fix this so that I can move forward in life? Because life is a good
Right.
journey. It doesn't have to be a bad journey. It's
Right.
going to have its trials and tribulations, obviously, right? But so many people just don't understand the trauma they're going through.
Yes.
Started
Yeah.
somewhere, and you can break that chain. You can
Absolutely.
become different, have healthier children, healthier relationships. And those are saying, well, what happens? Because I get this all the time. What happens with family? Some of them aren't gonna, I'm gonna lose them, or I'm gonna lose these
Mm.
friends. It's okay to have a new season of life.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
season was there. Now you're blossoming. This is spring. You
Yeah.
got new buds,
Yeah.
new flowers, new whatever. You're a new
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
attract new people. That's okay. You can still love on the old people in small doses and embrace the new people and realize
Yes.
that's your new
Yeah.
season and
Yeah.
journey of life.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
Right.
Yeah. I love
So,
that.
yeah, I love our conversation. This is great. I'm gonna have to unfortunately miss a lot of stuff. We're gonna
I
have to,
know.
we're gonna have to, I hope so, because literally, just to show you, like, I prepare a lot. I
Amazing.
literally I literally just love this conversation, and we're gonna have to end up having a part two. We're gonna have to have you on again, because
Yay. I would love that.
we're gonna have to have some other conversation. But there is two things I want to finalize, because I know I only got
Sure.
a few minutes left. So, what is the behavioral science of attraction? How did you use this to create your proven three-phase process? And what is this
Yeah.
three-phase process?
Yeah, absolutely. Behavioral science of attraction is a term I actually came up with. The reason I came up with it is because I've grown up and had it rammed down my throat, this idea about the law of attraction, right? And law of attraction is kind of an enigmatic manifesting thing. And everyone's like, I want to manifest my husband or manifest my wife and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of it is a load of BS. Like, a lot of it is a load of, especially in pop culture, a lot of it is just like really badly written, really badly explained. I, because I'm a science nerd, went really deep into understanding how does actually law of attraction work on a psychological level. And really, what I ended up in was behavioral science. And the attraction piece is kind of a bit of like wordplay on, obviously, looking at relationships. But really what I got down to was law of attraction is basically you're attracting what you are being on an unconscious level, right? So if internally I am full of scarcity and freaking out, I'm going to attract more scarcity. If I'm full of abundance and I'm feeling, on cloud nine, I'm full of confidence, blah, 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 I'm going to attract more of that. That's kind of in a really basic layman's terms way of explaining it. So how do we work with our unconscious mind and get to kind of maneuver and optimize what's going on at an internal level? Behavioral science. All the work that I do, right? Looking at your core wounds, looking at your unconscious patterns, looking at your self-sabotage, clearing all of those out. So that kind of made me think, we'll put two and two together. When we think about people who get into bad relationships, or people who end up, going through multiple divorces, or people who end up dating the same kind of person and ending up in this pattern, the reason they're in that pattern is because of a combination of behavioral science and law of attraction. Their unconscious stuff is priming them to attract stuff that's not working for them. So when I think about behavioral science of attraction, it's kind of this mashup of the two ideas. It really is about, what is it that you are attracting on an unconscious level right now? What is it that you need to be attracting on an unconscious level to be happy long term? And how do you go about doing that? Right? So if I'm attracting a load of men that cheat on me, for example, okay, well, clearly something internally is going on for me that's going to be making me attract those kind of men. So what is it that I need to be attracting to be happy? Well, I need to be attracting, based on the work that I've done with myself and what I know about myself, someone who's monogamous, who's trustworthy, blah, blah, blah. So how do I actually do that internally? That's the third piece. And so that's kind of the framing of what the behavioral science of attraction is. On the kind of the three phases level, I've broken that down into a chronological process. It's an end-to-end solution. My old corporate days kind of haunt me a little bit, but I really wanted something that's kind of seamless, that would take people from point A to point B. They don't need tons of therapy. They don't need to do, ayahuasca retreats or whatever. It's like, no, you just show up 15 minutes a day and you just follow this process, obviously with my support. And the three pillars are liberation, behavioral science, and integrity. Liberation is all about diving into that self-sabotage and your patterns and your unconscious blockers and all the things that are getting in the way of you being in a happy, healthy, meaningful, fulfilling relationship. Because there's going to be tons of stuff there, and we all have it. Everyone's got loads of work to do in the liberation phase. So how can we get clear on what those things are, and how can we clear them out at the root level so that they don't come back and bother you later down the line? So the clearing out phase. And that's kind of where I work with the neuroscience, and I give all these really cool tools and the hacks that I've learned over the years that have really helped me kind of accelerate my own growth, and then share that with clients and seen their growth, really, really fast, 21 days. So the liberation phase is clearing that out. Phase 2 is the behavioral science phase. So now that you've cleared out all of that junk, you can probably start to see more clearly, right? Because you're not shrouded, your view isn't shrouded anymore, your belief systems are a little bit more in gear. So now that you can see more clearly and your self-worth has gone up, now you can begin to get curious about, what is it that I actually need to be happy, right? Now that I can see myself, now that I'm connected to myself, now that nothing's holding me back, can I be really honest with myself and get curious on, like, what does it actually need to be happy in my life? What does that look like? And what does that look like from a gender dynamics point of view? What does that look like from a, practical life point of view, compatibility point of view, all of these things. And then phase 3 is, how do I, now that I've cleared out all of that past, got clear on what is that I want to need, how do I get my life into integrity so that I can actually start building a life where I get those things met in an easeful, organic, effortless way, so that it's not something I'm having to kind of fight for and, use my conscious mind to bludgeon my way into doing, but it's something that happens effortlessly and easily. And it just becomes that you're living a really great life. You don't even realize how you did it, but you just maneuver your life that way. And then you attract all the right things that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Oh, absolutely. It's basically like a lot of things in life that we want to achieve. You need to have a roadmap. You need to understand a process and start at A and end up at Z or Z, however you pronounce it. So yeah, it does make perfect sense. Obviously, there's so much more than this. But again, short on time. I do appreciate that and recommend people definitely check you out. Right. Check out what you do and or reach out to you, but we'll discuss that in a second. So, Katerina, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Give a heck about your love life and never give up on that, because you deserve healthy, rewarding, nourishing, meaningful love. And if you're not feeling that right now, then something's getting in the way. And that needs to go, because you deserve it. And it's never too late. You're never too old. The stakes are never too high. You're never too enmeshed with someone. You can always transform your love life. It's always doing work around your relationships and giving a heck about this part of your life is a win-win. Not only because you're either going to end up improving your current relationship and transforming that for the better, or you're going to end up leaving and finding someone else better really quickly, because you will when you do the inner work. Trust me, you will find them really quickly. Some clients find someone new in like 3 months and they're super happy. So it's a win-win in that aspect. But also in doing this inner work, in building this relationship with yourself, you create foundations that are healthy and stable and secure for you to have a better career, earn more money, have better family dynamics, be better to your children, be better to your body, all of these wonderful things. And the kind of final thing I'll leave you with is that people who are securely attached from an attachment perspective, statistically, they go out and they actually make more money and they have better careers. Why? Because they have more mental real estate to actually go and be successful. They're not bogged down with anxiety and self-doubt and rumination and procrastination and perfectionism. They're free because they're healed and they can go and achieve a lot more. So let that be your motivation.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. So our time is up, unfortunately. I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, could you please tell the listeners what's the best way they can reach you?
Yeah, best way to reach me is either on my website, www.KaterinaPolonska.com, or find me on Instagram at Katerina Polonska, or find me on LinkedIn, Katerina Polonski. There's a Y on the end for LinkedIn. Good old Eastern European naming conventions. But definitely find me, drop me a DM, and I have a free masterclass on the behavioral science of attraction on my website on the homepage. So just go through, click on it, and you'll get straight through to it. And it's well worth a watch if you want to dive into more.
Fantastic. For those that are new to the show, watching or listening, go to giveaheck.com. The podcast, you'll see at the top, click on it. You'll see a picture of Katerina and you will see abbreviated show notes, which will list her website as well as her social media connections. And also you will be able to go, if you heard specific things in the podcast you like, you will see a timeline and you'll be able to go to that specific section of the podcast and listen to it again. I highly suggest you listen to the whole thing, but that's just me. So thank you so much. Any last comments you'd like to share before we wrap up the show?
Give a heck about your love life. Time today. Come on, people.
Yeah. Hey, come on. Give a heck about everything in your life, right? Life Absolutely. Is meant to be lived on purpose, not by Absolutely. Accident, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
Thank you so much. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Katerina. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.